The golden sun sank slowly behind rugged peaks as its light spilled over a bustling tourist hub nestled in the heart of a quiet mountain village. Narrow cobblestone streets wound through clusters of charming old buildings and lively market stalls. Families ambled amid the vibrant chaos of vendors calling out their wares, children darted between stands clutching sugary treats, and elders sat on weathered benches exchanging stories of yesteryear. The scent of spiced tea and freshly baked bread mingled with the cool mountain air, promising both comfort and adventure. Along one particularly narrow lane, bordered by ancient stone walls, ambled a scruffy stray dog whose matted fur and soulful brown eyes told a story of hardship and endurance. Known affectionately among the locals as Max, this gentle creature had long been a silent witness to the village's rhythms, greeting passers-by with an eager wag of his tail and a hopeful gaze that spoke of trust despite the scars of years spent fending for himself. For many, Max was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even the most battered among us could still seek a touch of kindness. On this fateful day, however, the comforting image of Max was about to be marred by cruelty. A group of rowdy tourists had recently arrived. Their laughter and careless banter disrupted the village's gentle hum, and amid their excitement their eyes fell upon Max. What began as innocuous glances and hushed chuckles soon escalated. Encouraged by one another's laughter, a young man stooped, plucked a rock from the path, and hurled it directly at the stray. The rock struck Max suddenly. The dog yelped in pain and scrambled away with his tail tucked tightly. Soon, more stones rained down in a callous display of amusement, each impact a reminder of humanity's capacity for cruelty. As Max limped away toward the park's shadowed fringe, his once bright eyes now mirrored deep sorrow and betrayal. Few in the village knew that Max was far more than a stray. He had once been the cherished companion of a retired Army general, Thomas Bennett, a man whose life had been defined by courage on distant battlefields and whose heart had softened in the presence of his loyal friend. For years, the two had shared quiet hikes through nature's majesty and comforting silences during times of inner turmoil. When illness forced General Bennett into seclusion, he made the agonizing decision to entrust Max's care to a dear friend in a neighboring village. Yet, every day, Thomas wondered if his cherished companion was thriving. That very evening, as twilight deepened into a tapestry of indigo and scattered stars, an unexpected phone call shattered the general's routine. CLA, a compassionate local shopkeeper, spoke in a trembling voice. "General, it's Max. Something terrible happened in the park. He's been hurt." Those words, heavy with urgency and despair, stirred Thomas's soul. In a heartbeat, his modest study, with its cooling cup of tea and cherished photographs, was replaced by a determination reminiscent of his days in service. Without hesitation, Thomas donned the coat that had accompanied him through countless trials and stepped out into the cool night. Each measured step bore the resolve of a man who had led soldiers into battle, now driven by the need to rescue his lost friend. Arriving in the village just before midnight, his imposing figure and unwavering purpose commanded respect and stirred whispers among the villagers. He made his way with silent resolve towards Sully's small, warmly lit shop, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. Inside, CLA greeted him with a mix of relief and sorrow. "General, I searched the park until I found a clue," she recounted softly. "I saw Max hiding beneath that old bench at the far edge." There was no time to waste, and together they hurried through the quiet park. At last, beneath the shadow of a weathered bench, they discovered Max curled up in desperate concealment. His matted fur was stained with dirt and blood, and his eyes shone with pain and fear. Gently, Thomas knelt beside Max and spoke in a tender, steady tone. "It's okay, boy. I'm here now. You're safe." With practiced care, he wrapped the wounded dog in a soft, worn blanket, the same blanket that had once warmed him during long nights of solitude, and lifted him carefully into his arms. Together, they returned to CLA's shop, where the aroma of warm water and comforting food filled the small space. Thomas meticulously cleaned Max's wounds, his every touch filled with the hope of mending both body and spirit. As Max's heavy eyelids began to droop, resting his head on Thomas's knee, the general's mind churned with resolve. This was no random act of cruelty. It was a deliberate strike against something sacred. Justice would be served, not solely in the eyes of the law, but in the hearts of everyone who believed in compassion. At dawn, soft light crept over the village and whispers of the general's urgent intervention spread like wildfire. The tourists, once so assured of their mischief, now exchanged anxious glances as guilt and fear replaced their earlier laughter. In the modest village square, where ancient trees provided quiet witness, residents gathered. Thomas stood before them, his voice resonating with authority and deep sorrow. "I have spoken to every witness," he announced, "and I have learned the truth behind what happened to Max. This is not just about punishment. It is about upholding our collective humanity. Every life deserves respect." His words, sincere and piercing, struck a chord among the villagers, kindling both regret and hope. Later that day, Thomas sought out the group of tourists responsible for the heinous act. In a dimly lit tavern on the village's edge, where earlier their laughter had been carefree, the mood now shifted to one of uneasy silence as the general approached their table. "You must be the ones responsible," he stated with quiet but unwavering authority. A tall, broad-shouldered tourist leaned back dismissively and challenged. "And who might you be?" The general's reply was measured and firm. "I am General Thomas Bennett, and I am the man who knew this dog as my family." The revelation struck the table like a thunderclap. One woman stuttered, We didn't know it was your dog." Thomas's eyes narrowed as he continued, "It is never just a dog. It is a loyal friend that teaches us compassion and respect. Your actions have consequences that go far beyond what you can imagine." The silence that followed was heavy with remorse. That very afternoon, Thomas met with the village mayor and local constable in the modest town hall. He outlined a plan that went beyond simple retribution. "Instead of turning you over to the authorities immediately, you will spend the next 2 weeks working at our old animal shelter," he declared. "There, you will learn the true meaning of compassion by caring for those you once dismissed." The mayor, deeply respectful of Thomas's honor, consented without hesitation. Thus began an unexpected journey of rehabilitation. At the animal shelter, a time-worn building with crumbling walls, broken fences, and rusted kennels, the offending tourists were thrust into a harsh world of responsibility. Their first days were filled with grumbling as they scrubbed grimy kennels, repaired dilapidated barriers, and organized neglected supplies. Yet amid their protests, a transformation began. During a quiet break, a timid terrier approached one of the tourists. Coaxed by CLA's gentle guidance, the woman hesitated and then reached out. The terrier, after a cautious sniff, offered a tentative lick. A small, almost imperceptible smile crept across her face, a sign that even the hardest hearts could soften when met with kindness. As the week wore on, the physical renovations of the shelter became evident. New coats of paint brightened the faded walls, and repaired fences lent the building a renewed sense of security. Yet the most remarkable change was not in the structure, but in the hearts of those who worked there. Derek, a once resolute tourist, found himself inexplicably drawn to Max. The stray, once the target of cruelty, now followed him from task to task, as if seeking solace in a familiar presence. In quiet moments, the two forged an unspoken bond. Meanwhile, Lisa, a gentle, red-haired woman with a quiet strength, began caring for a litter of abandoned puppies. One fragile pup, soon named Daisy, clung to her as if it were a lifeline. Lisa's nurturing transformed not only the lives of these animals but also her own, as she discovered within herself a reservoir of compassion and determination. Every evening, as the workers and villagers gathered around a crackling bonfire in the shelter's courtyard, General Bennett spoke of rebuilding more than just a structure. "Rebuilding this shelter is not merely about fixing broken walls," he intoned softly, "but about healing the wounds within us, the wounds inflicted by cruelty and neglect. Together, we can forge a future built on compassion." In the flickering firelight, barriers dissolved, and a fragile unity began to take root. Yet amid the transformation, a creeping sense of foreboding began to unsettle the group. One crisp morning, while preparing for another day of labor, Derek discovered a set of large, deliberate footprints near the outer fence. The heavy boot prints led directly to a section of the shelter where a latch had been severed deliberately. A chill ran down everyone's spine as they realized someone had been watching. "What if they're here for more than just the animals?" whispered Lisa, voice quivering with uncertainty. The question hung in the air, a dark omen amid the day's gentle routine. That evening, as a cold wind rattled the broken windows of the shelter, Thomas gathered everyone in the cramped common room. Huddled beneath the flickering light of a single lamp, the air was thick with anxiety. "We must remain vigilant," he declared in a tone both gentle and unyielding. Whoever is out there is testing our defenses and seeking to strike at the very heart of our community. We cannot, and will not, allow fear to rule our lives." His words resonated deeply as nods of agreement and murmurs of apprehension rippled through the gathered crowd. In the pre-dawn hours of the next morning, as the shelter slept fitfully, a grainy image appeared on a newly installed security monitor. The image showed a shadowy figure moving with deliberate stealth near the kennels, clutching something long and slender, a crowbar. Though the footage was blurry, the implications were clear. The shelter was under threat, and the perpetrators were prepared to escalate their cruelty. Before anyone could fully process the ominous sign, a series of violent knocks shattered the tentative calm. With hearts pounding, the shelter's inhabitants braced themselves for confrontation. Suddenly, the door burst open with a violent crash. Masked intruders clad in dark tactical gear flooded into the building. Their faces were hidden, their eyes cold and calculating. "Jacob, you know why we're here. Open the door and no one gets hurt," barked a voice that carried the chill of a well-practiced order. In that moment, the intruders advanced with military precision, transforming every piece of furniture into a weapon of defense. Chaos erupted as Thomas shouted for everyone to take cover behind overturned tables and battered chairs. "Get to the back door now," he commanded, his voice slicing through the clamor. Amid the bedlam, Max, despite his injuries, sprang into action. The stray darted between the combatants, his fierce barks acting as a rallying cry. With a burst of protective determination, Max lunged at an attacker, throwing him off balance. Taking advantage of the confusion, Thomas grabbed a fallen rifle and struck another intruder's knee with its butt, the heavy impact echoing through the room. Karen, her eyes blazing with fury, flung a chair with precision, sending one assailant reeling. Meanwhile, amid the pandemonium, Jacob, a man whose earlier silence had only deepened the mystery, found himself momentarily freed from his constraints. As a dense cloud of foam from a hastily deployed fire extinguisher filled the room, Thomas's voice rang out once again. "Now, everyone, get out the back door!" With adrenaline surging, the group scattered into the night, leaving behind a battered shelter and the echo of the masked leader's parting threat. "You have no idea what you're protecting." Outside, beneath the shelter of dense woods and ancient pines, the survivors regrouped, hearts pounding and breaths ragged. They ran along narrow, moonlit paths as the sounds of pursuing footsteps and shouted orders faded into the distance. Even as they paused to catch their breath, the memory of the intruder's parting words echoed, "You have no idea what you're protecting." The threat lingered like a dark specter over their newfound unity. Huddled beneath the low boughs of towering pines, they gathered in a circle. Max, though limping from his earlier exertions, stayed loyally close to Lisa, whose tear-streaked face bore a mixture of terror and gratitude. She knelt beside him and whispered, "You saved us, brave boy." Her trembling hands smoothed over his matted fur as if to reassure both of them that hope was not lost. Thomas, still catching his breath, surveyed the dark woods from which they had fled. "We did it together," he said softly but with unwavering resolve. "And together we will face whatever comes next." In that solemn moment, every survivor felt their determination harden. They would rebuild, they would uncover the truth behind the attack, and they would protect their sanctuary at all costs. In the days that followed, while the immediate threat receded into a distant memory, the survivors turned their focus to strengthening the shelter. Reinforced locks were bolted onto every door, and every window was boarded securely. Chris, ever vigilant, monitored each blind spot via newly installed security cameras. Simultaneously, Thomas began to probe deeper into the shelter's murky past, a past that now seemed inexplicably linked to the current danger. One rainy afternoon, as the group gathered in the modest common room to share a sparse meal, Thomas revealed a yellowed newspaper clipping he had discovered among old records. The faded headline read, "Local Shelter Faces Closure Amid Bitter Land Dispute." In the article, long-forgotten legal battles and hidden agendas were chronicled. "This place has always carried secrets," Thomas murmured. "Secrets that someone might kill to keep buried." His words left a heavy silence in their wake, as each person contemplated the possibility that the recent attack might be connected to long-standing vendettas. That night, under a sky swollen with rain, Thomas organized a covert expedition. Accompanied by Lisa and the ever-loyal Max, he descended into the shelter's basement, a realm of forgotten relics and silent memories. The narrow staircase groaned under their weight as they entered a dark, musty space filled with stacked boxes, abandoned equipment, and rusted metal cabinets. Faded insignias and cryptic labels marked the surfaces of these relics. Max's ears perked up as he led them to a particular cabinet. With a sharp bark, he signaled that something was amiss. Thomas and Lisa exchanged a glance of silent understanding. Carefully, they moved the old cabinet aside to reveal a section of the floor that resonated with a hollow sound when tapped. Retrieving a crowbar from a nearby toolbox, Thomas pried open a loose panel. Beneath it lay a rusted hatch with a corroded handle, its appearance suggesting it had been sealed for decades. Lisa's heart pounded as she peered into the darkness beyond. The hatch creaked open, revealing a narrow tunnel descending into cold, oppressive blackness. A damp draft, carrying a distinct metallic tang, filled the space. "Are we really going down there?" Lisa whispered, caught between terror and determination. "We have no choice," Thomas replied firmly. "If there is something hidden beneath this shelter, some truth that explains these attacks, we must find it. Max is guiding us, and I trust him." With Max at their side, they stepped into the tunnel. The beam of Thomas's flashlight cut a narrow swath through the darkness as every step forward was laden with both dread and anticipation. The tunnel eventually opened into a small, claustrophobic chamber. Rows of rusted metal crates lined the walls, their surfaces marked with faded government insignias and warning labels. One word, biohazard, leapt out from a crate, its meaning as ominous as the silence that followed. In that hidden chamber, deep beneath the shelter's floor, evidence of a long-forgotten government project lay undisturbed, a project that might explain the bitter vendettas and the present threat. Before they could document every detail, Karen's urgent voice crackled over a radio from the main building. "Multiple vehicles are approaching." Chris, monitoring the security feeds, confirmed that black SUVs were rolling up the village road, their headlights slicing through the night like searchlights. Thomas's heart pounded as he turned to Lisa. "We need to get back up here, now," he ordered. With Max barking insistently, they retraced their steps, emerging from the tunnel just as the sounds of heavy boots and hushed commands once again filled the shelter. Back in the main room, chaos reigned once more as intruders in tactical gear surged into the building with renewed determination. The survivors fought desperately to reclaim their sanctuary. Chairs were thrown, tables served as barricades, and every person contributed to the desperate defense. Thomas's voice rang out over the clamor. "Hold the line, do not let them take our home." Amid the melee, Max, ever the vigilant guardian, darted among the combatants, his barks a rallying cry that stoked the defenders' courage. With a flash of determination, Thomas seized a fallen rifle and struck an assailant's knee with its butt, the resounding impact echoing throughout the room. Karen and Derek spearheaded a counterattack, their actions precise and fueled by desperation. The masked leader, his eyes obscured behind a cold visor, barked orders as he attempted to regain control. But the united defenders, emboldened by their shared resolve, refused to yield. In a moment of chaos, as a dense cloud of fire extinguisher foam engulfed the room, Thomas shouted, "Everyone, get out the back door!" The survivors scattered into the night once again, slipping away into the shadowed forest while the masked intruders were forced into a hasty retreat. Their leader's parting threat, a promise that their battle was far from over, echoed in the dark. Outside, under the cover of the trees, the survivors gathered, their faces marked by exhaustion and determination. Huddled beneath the ancient pines, they caught their breath. Lisa cradled Max in her arms, tears mingling with relief as she whispered words of gratitude to the loyal dog. Thomas, his gaze fixed on the retreating figures in the distance, declared, "We have each other. As long as we stand together, nothing can break our spirit." In that moment, every survivor felt an unspoken vow, the commitment to rebuild, to unearth the truth behind the shelter's secrets, and to defend the legacy of compassion they had forged. In the weeks that followed, the survivors and the rehabilitated former offenders redoubled their efforts to secure and restore the shelter. Every door was reinforced, every window boarded up, and new security measures were installed under Chris's careful watch. Meanwhile, Thomas and the group continued to piece together the shelter's hidden past. They scrutinized every faded insignia, every cryptic label on the metal crates, determined to understand the government project that had once stirred bitter conflicts and now threatened their hard-won sanctuary. As the immediate threat receded into the background, life at the shelter began to take on a new, hopeful rhythm. The building transformed from a crumbling relic into a symbol of resilience. Fresh coats of paint brightened its walls, repaired fences stood as proud testaments to unity, and the animals, once frightened and withdrawn, now thrived under the careful care of their guardians. Derek, whose initial resistance had given way to a profound bond with Max, found solace in the silent companionship of the loyal stray. Lisa's nurturing of the abandoned puppies, especially fragile little Daisy, became a source of renewed strength, inspiring those around her. Even Karen, once skeptical of change, began to embrace the shelter as the heart of their community. One cool autumn morning, as the village stirred beneath a pale, misty sky, Thomas gathered the group once more in the newly revitalized common room. "We are not merely defending a building," he said, his voice resonant with quiet authority. "We are preserving the legacy of our community, of love, loyalty, and the unwavering belief in compassion. The secrets we have uncovered in these walls bind us together, and they remind us that even in the darkest times, hope can be found in the smallest acts of kindness." His words rekindled the collective determination of those present. Years later, the story of Max, General Thomas Bennett, and the brave souls who defended the shelter became a cherished legend in the mountain village. In quiet conversations over steaming cups of tea, in the laughter of children playing near the market stalls, and in reflective moments beneath ancient trees, the tale was recounted with reverence. Max, once a battered stray, had transcended cruelty to become a symbol of resilience and unity. Lisa, now a pillar of compassion, would recount the extraordinary journey to her children beneath the same skies that had witnessed their struggles and triumphs. Every time she passed the old clearing where that fateful night had unfolded, she paused, grateful for the lessons of loyalty, courage, and the power of community. Thus, the legacy of Max and the shelter lived on, a testament to the transformative power of compassion, the strength that arises when people stand together, and the enduring light that can shine even in the darkest of times.